What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Holy Legion. Welcome to the Dread Elf, the Bears, and especially welcome to the Royal Manticoran Navy tonight, who might be joining us for the first time. The first time I met Mr. Weber, which you don't remember, I'm sure, because I said hi briefly and that was it, was at a convention in, I think, 2012 in lovely San Jose, California. It was called BayCon, which I used to be invited to, and you were there, and I saw you strolling around in your Royal Manticoran Navy uniform with like this whole posse of people also wearing uniforms, and I saw that, and I was like, holy crap! I want to have that kind of clout one day. How did that happen? How did you? I guess I should say hi. This is David Weber.
Well, actually, this is David Weber, the blank screen.
The blank screen?
Yeah, we can't get my camera to cooperate tonight, so you're just gonna, you're gonna be spared. That's what you're gonna be.
Excellent.
But it means
he's best known for being a Braves fan, I think.
Yes. So. Well, and right this minute, the Braves are leading the Phillies 3-1. Going to the 6th. So not that I'm being distracted in any way from the podcast. Now, the Royal, I cannot take credit for the existence of the fan club. Okay. That was actually, more than anybody else's work, that was the work of Martin Lessem, who is the head of the fan club right to this day. He asked me if I would object to his organizing an official sanctioned fan club. And I said, knock yourself out. The last time I looked, they were like over 5,000 members. Well, and like any organization, when it's been around as long as they've been around, and, we've all seen fan organizations, all of them have their sclerotic arteries here and there, because you can't make everybody happy. But I look at what the TRMN has done over the years in terms of like the Saving Grace Canine Service Dogs for Vets program. We raised, I think, close to $25,000 at one HonorCon. Cool. For Saving Grace. And the con only had about 200 people at it, 250, 300, somewhere in there. That's the kind of people who have been attracted to this club. And I have to say that it makes me feel like I must be doing something right in the books to attract that caliber of people. Okay.
That's so cool.
It's been a great honor in a lot of ways. But I tell them that, this is really their organization, not mine. Okay. Do I care how they conduct themselves and take pride in the way they conduct themselves? Yes. By and large, though, I'm along for the ride. While they make their own rules, their own procedures, and undertake their own projects, and they're cool people.
Great, it's really great. My second person beside me, not the little icon here, is Mr. Richard Fox. Richard Fox is another #1 best-selling author. What team do you support in the MLB?
Oh boy, baseball. It's been a while since I've been really passionate about a team.
I'm disappointed.
John, we don't need to talk to him anymore tonight.
We're done.
We'll talk to you later, Richard.
John, I hate to break it to you, but there are rumors about
don't do this to me. Don't do it.
About the team with your hat on there is coming to Vegas. I mean, I'm just saying. So we'll see.
That hurts my soul. You guys stole our Raiders, and now you're going to steal the A's too. It's just terrible.
Well, I have to. My son, who's at Paris Island right now, he's almost exactly halfway through basic as we speak, is a big-time Ravens fan. Okay, and football's not really my sport, but unfortunately, he figures that means he has to be a Baltimore Orioles fan too. That has not worked out well. I mean, fans in Baltimore have got to be whiplashed between their football franchise and their baseball franchise. I mean, it's just,
Absolutely.
However, aside from the fact that they play baseball on Grayson, okay, it doesn't have a whole lot to do with the science fiction that I write.
No, when I heard you were incorporating baseball into your science fiction universe, it made me so happy. So that baseball endures in the future. I wrote a novella about that. Stephen King did a science fiction anthology of baseball. Gosh, about 15 years ago. And of course, it was pretty prevalent in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Also, they kept referencing baseball in that. It makes me happy when that endures, and that's something that is listed as a cultural icon in a series. So when you brought that into Grayson, that was that touched my heart a little bit.
Well, I have to say, that the scene where Andrew LaFollette is explaining the bulk to Mike Hinkey, I said no, it doesn't work that way,
That was the goal. Where's the goalkeeper or something like that?
Yeah,
right?
no, that was no. Well, okay, I was going to do a scene with Alistair McKeon where Honor has her tree cats are in the planetary series back on Grayson, and of course, she can't watch them live because she's at man. So they've been sending her the games, as they're played, and she's been not fast forwarding ahead. She's been watching every minute of it, and they're in game 7, and McKeon comes in and she says, sit down. It's the home half of the 9th, and we're down 2 runs, bases loaded, 2 out, and our best hitter is coming to the plate. I'll talk to you in a minute. And that's when McKeon says, where's the goalie, kind of thing. But I did slip in. I don't know how many people noticed. I did slip in LaFollette saying, once upon a time in one of the leagues back on Earth, the batter didn't have to hit for himself.
Nice. Nice.
I think I lost that one though. It's looking bad.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh man. Well, the reason I have both these gentlemen on tonight is they have recently come out with a book together. It's called Governor, and I have the link in the description below. So if you guys like what you're hearing over the course of the evening, definitely support them and their work. It's beautiful stuff. Both Richard and David are just the stalwarts of science fiction. They're some of the best writers out there. So you guys are awesome. Yeah, that's all I gotta say. That's the end of the stream.
Okay. Yeah, you're done now. Okay. I do have to say that one of the interesting things about it is I think that this is the first novel by 2 guys who both won the Dragon for military science fiction.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
Yep.
And we have another project coming up that will have 3 Dragon Award winners in it. It's an anthology. And actually it'll have, I think it might have 4. Richard, me, Larry Correa, and Jim Butcher.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Jim Butcher should count several times because of the sheer number of Dragon Awards he's won.
Well, okay, yeah, if you're gonna, yeah. But I'm looking forward to that project when we.
Yeah, I guess I'm the only Dragon Award loser on the panel, so it's kind of annoying. That's how I met Richard. So I met David. So I met David through that, and I didn't realize that you were you at the time. I was on some panels at that convention, and I saw you guys walking around, and I figured you were part of the fan club, and just a member of the fan club there. And so when I started talking to you, I had no idea who you were. And then somebody informed me later, and I figured that's how I actually decided to start reading your work. Was I saw this, I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool that this guy inspires all of this. And so I went up to one of the tables at the convention there and bought On Basilisk Station and proceeded from there. So interesting at the time. Yeah, you blended in very well.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. David, I got to congratulate you because the United States Space Force apparently are Honor Harrington fans because their proposed uniforms.
I saw. Oh my gosh,
like Honors.
Yeah. I have to admit that when I began writing the Honor Harrington books, I did not project the level of success that the character and the series eventually enjoyed. What happened was that everything I was writing was spawning sequels. Okay. And so Jim Bain said to me, I have a novel, you should pardon the expression, idea. Why don't you, like, I don't know, plan a series from the get go? So I put together 10 proposals for him. And one of them was Honor Harrington. One of them was what has since become the Safehold books with Tor. And one of them was the Gordian universe that Jacob Holo and I are doing together. So I tell people, I haven't really had a new idea for a series in 30 years, but I didn't know at that time that Jim had been looking for someone to do a Horatio Hornblower in space equivalent. So the instant that he read Honor Harrington, the 6'2" Eurasian starship captain, boom, he was like, okay. I said, buy 2 books. No, buy 3. Hell, buy 4. Okay, kind of thing. And I was like, at that point in my career, a 4-book contract was like huge. Okay. But I'd planned on killing her off in about 6 books. And a lot of people have probably already heard this, but when Alistair McKeon dies in the book At All Costs, I flipped his and her role from that book. The reader
Right.
was supposed to find out that Honor had been killed exactly the way that she found out that Alistair had been killed, which is like, you would have had a little bit more warning because you would have known that she was wounded and that her flag deck had depressurized, etc. But the problem was that it was Eric Flint and I have also done collaborations in the Arniverse. And the problem is that he wrote a short story and he asked me for some stuff he could use in the short story. And I gave it to him without realizing that I was pulling the entire storyline forward about 20 years. And that meant that there wasn't time for Honor to die and then for her kids to grow up to be the lead characters in the new series. For those who have read the Shadow of Saganami and the books, its sequels, Shadow of Saganami was supposed to be the break book that introduced the young officers who would be the ship commanders by the time Honor's children were coming along. Helen Zilwicki and her fellow midshipmen. And then I realized that there was no way that I could stretch I couldn't get everything done I needed to do if I killed Honor at that point. And I will tell you that it did not break my heart for a lot of reasons. One being that I really, really like Honor Harrington. And the other being, well, obviously, there's a commercial aspect to it. Okay. It's like, wow, I didn't know they were going to go this well, but there's also the fact that I know how many people have invested in her. And I think they would have forgiven me for the way that she would have died and what her death would have accomplished. Okay.
Have you ever thought about on this doing an alternate universe where she did die and splintering that off and then doing the what if?
I thought about it, but not too hard. I got too many other things I need to be doing.
That's fair.
One of the reasons, okay, the Governor, the book that Richard and I did together. Okay, that's a project that has been waiting for me to get back to for 15 years, easy, maybe even longer. I did the original Path of the Fury. It was actually written before the first Honor Harrington novel. Okay. And it's one of my favorite books that I've ever done. And I had people who were saying, I would really like to have that in hardcover. Well, it was first issued as a mass market paperback. It's extraordinarily rare for mass market to be re-released in hardcover. It happened with the Honor Harringtons, but there's also like 20 novels in the series. Okay. So what I did is I wrote the prequel that I had meant to write for many years, which was, and bound it together with the original novel in Fury Born. So it's twice as long as Path of the Fury was. And it tells Alicia DeVries' story from when she's like 13 up to where Path of the Fury began, and then runs the rest of the way. Okay. Well, what Richard and I are working on is a series that I actually began well before that for Bane. And the problem was that I'd written about 85,000 words of it when I realized that I had not made the technology sufficiently cruder for something that was happening 300 or 400 years before the technology in Path of the Fury. So I put all that aside and started again, but I was really grinding to get it done. I mean, I was getting maybe 1,100, 1,200 words a day done, kind of thing. And so Jim Bain and I were talking. He asked me how I was going to say, well, it's really, and he said, well, why don't you write something else? And I said, because I got a contract to deliver this book. And he says, yes, who's the contract with? And I said, well, you. And he said, okay, if I tell you, go write something else, go write something else. So I'm like, okay, fine. And I did that. And then I never got back to it. And it occurred to me that Richard might be the guy that I needed to get Governor, the first book in this prequel series, up and running.
Nice.
It probably helped that when I first met David in person, one of the first things I told him is I had a cat named Nimitz and then another cat named Samantha. And I was like,
awesome.
Okay. Clearly, I've read his work. So.
Yeah. Okay.
But, well, the thing is, okay, you never know until you work with someone how the collaboration is going to work. Even if you have an idea going in of how you think it's going to break down, who's going to do what, you usually find out that it shifts, it adjusts while you're in there. And every collaborative relationship is different from every other collaborative relationship. Okay. And this one went some places that I didn't expect it to go. Okay. It's called Serendipity. And I really like the final product. Okay. The thing is that I won't do a collaboration unless I expect the final product to be at least as good as either of us would do solo, be different from what either of us would do solo, and usually, hopefully, give me a chance to learn or teach something along the way. Okay. I've learned something from everybody I've ever worked with. Okay. Just like you learn something from every author you've ever read, but it's a lot more interactive in the collaborative process. Okay. But if you think about it, any successful author's writing voice is a fusion of every other writer he's ever read, plus whatever he personally brings to it. Okay? Because you can't help being affected by other writers, even if it's to go like, oh, crap, well, I know better than do that kind of crap. Okay? I used to have a book that I carried around as my example of how not to write. And I would read passages from it in panels, and people would be going like, "Whoa," And
Nice.
I'd say, "Yeah, this guy is a bestseller in Australia." Okay.
Is his name Liam Gray?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Is it Chuck Wendig?
No, it's not. But I will tell you this: the book includes a scene in which you find out that the signature weapon of the SAS is the liquid nitrogen grenade. And that if you throw one into a pool of water in a subterranean base in Antarctica where there's water pouring down into like the diving pool, the ice will run up the pouring down water and freeze it. Yes.
Okay.
That was also that you can
Sounds
hang.
fun.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it turns out that a big part of what's going on is that during the Nixon administration, they did all the development work on a stealth aircraft in Antarctica for security purposes. And they have a flyable, fully armed version of the aircraft, which has been hanging upside down from its tail assembly, frozen in the ice when the hangar it was in on the flow turned over, but now it's rolled back up. And the guy who knows how to fly an Osprey figures out the controls, and to get out of the ice, he fires up the engines of the aircraft that's been hanging upside down for 25 years, runs up the afterburners to melt the ice, to turn loose of the tail assembly, and then takes off through the ice stalagmites that have blocked the way by holding down the trigger on his Vulcan and flying straight through the shower of ice without ingesting a single foreign object.
I will have a counterpoint to this writing, and I'm going to argue with you that this writing is fantastic.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'll give you that.
Still a better love story than Twilight.
Yeah, it has clearly stuck with you for how many years that you remember it?
That's because I can't get it amputated. I mean, no, actually, this book did it. It was kind of had the fascination of a train wreck. Okay, you're reading it and you're going like, well, you can't top that, and then you find out that effortlessly he can. And it's probably not nice of me to make fun of the book, but if you're going to write, okay, one of the things, and Richard and I, one of the things that has to happen is that what you write has to be plausible to your reader. Okay. Yeah. It's not enough, for example, to say, well, MacMahon was really that stupid at the Battle of Sedan. Okay. You have to convince the reader that somebody could be as stupid as he was, as Napoleon III was in the Franco-Prussian War. Okay. And it takes a lot of setup to convince them that someone could be that stupid, Yeah. But if you just say, well, yes, he was that stupid because, and here's my proof that people are actually like that, the reader's going to say, yeah, but you sure didn't sell me on the fact that somebody would make this kind of, I think you just needed somebody to throw the battle, and that's what he did. And
I had that problem. I had that problem with my first manuscript. And there was an author who was a big author who I sent it to, and I was like, looking for the approval that I'm sure you still get a lot of that. And I do now too. And the guy said, the premise is no good. And I'm like, why is that? He said, suspension of disbelief. I couldn't do it. Yeah. You wouldn't give a teenage farmer some weapon of war to go out there and fight some battle like this. Doesn't make sense. And I said, I literally lifted that from this movie called Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a pretty standard hero journey stuff here, guys.
Yeah. So he's like, oh, yeah.
Well, okay.
It's fun.
I would say that if you're good at your craft, okay, and I consider it a craft. I'm not an author. I'm a storyteller. Okay. And the fact that I tell it in the printed word, that's just my medium. It's not who I am, and kind of thing. It's I consider myself a craftsman, I guess, is what I'm saying here, not an artist. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't passages in there that I'm not really pleased with when they get done and so forth, but by and large, I hew to the school that says that if the style becomes too big a part of the story, it begins distracting from the story itself.
Yes.
Okay. And so I write in a colloquial style, I use a lot of contractions and narrative. I want it to flow. I want the reader to I use punctuation to steer the reader without the reader even realizing that I'm doing it sometimes, because the eye just hits it. And you have to be aware of the language, the natural cadence of the language and so forth to do that. But you're using that awareness to tell the story. And the story is what you're really all about. Okay. And the story is always, always, always about the characters. Now, it may be, as in the case of the Honor Harrington books, that it's also about a huge interstellar war that you're telling the entire history of. Okay. But in the bottom line, for readers to be interested in the story, it has to be about people they care about. Now, they can care about them because they hate them. Okay. But they have to be invested in what happens to the characters, whether it's don't you dare kill Honor Harrington or I can't wait till you blow that son of a bitch Somerville away. Okay, they have to be invested. If they're not invested, then you have failed in what you set out to do. I mean, it's that simple. Okay,
Yeah.
and one of the things that happened in Governor is that Richard built characters who were different from the way I would have built them. Okay, now I took it and ran with it in some places, but he did a really, really good job of building. Probably, I'd say that probably I had more to do with the final evolution of Terrence than I did with the final evolution of his son or uh,
Ira?
Ira. Yes. Now, that doesn't mean that my fingerprints aren't in there too, but Richard built the original basis for the relationship, especially between those two characters and between Ira and Terrence. And Ira, it turns out, eventually she's going to be a critically important character. And he knew that I wanted her to be that critically important character when he started building her. So he gave her a background which makes her what she will eventually accomplish believable, because you see what she survived
Yeah.
to get to where she is now. You see what I'm saying? It goes to the heart of that plausible characterization thing that I was talking about. And the book has been well received. There are some people who are pissed because they thought it was a sequel to In Fury Born, not a 300-year prequel. But the problem, okay, by the time Alicia DeVry comes along in Fury Born, we are like 350 years beyond where this book is set, maybe even a little more. But she is in the Imperial Cadre, which is like the personal sworn liege men and women of the Emperor of the House of Murphy. Okay. This is the story, the first volume in the story of how that empire is created. And it begins at this early stage explaining why Alicia, especially given her ancestry, is, oh yeah, House of Murphy, we're real tight, you know, kind of thing. So, and I think it succeeds. I think it succeeds on its own merits, and I think it succeeds in being the building block that I wanted it to be. Excuse me.
No worries.
Shush. Yeah. Yes. She's like, wait, you're not petting me, you know?
I know the drill.
Yes.
Mine's getting his procedure tomorrow. I feel terrible for him.
Oh, well,
he's a 1-year-old puppy.
Mine was adopted by my twin adopted teenage daughters in their senior year of high school. They are now sophomores at college. So guess who Arnie lives with? You know,
nice.
Yeah.
We have a couple super chats I do want to get to before we continue. Sorry, guys, for the delay on these. So, a question for the panel: what was the better sci-fi novel, Lucifer's Hammer or Footfall? I'm going to go with Lucifer's Hammer on my end.
I think I'm going to vote for Hammer too. Footfall is, for want of a better term, and I hate to use this because it's such a buzzword. In Footfall, the characters have more agency against the threat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they actually go out and kick the alien's ass, if you know what I'm saying. Whereas in Lucifer's Hammer, it's a vast impersonal force. But I think that Lucifer's Hammer does a better job of dealing with all of that huge cast of characters that come together and focus and find themselves.
I think so too. It's a tight novel.
It is.
It's really good.
Yes.
So,
actually, I'm sorry. I haven't read Footfall.
Okay. Yeah. No worries.
Well, Footfall is where they basically build an Orion pusher battleship to go out and deal with the aliens. So the aliens are like, holy shit.
Cool. Yeah, the second question here is I will go further, and my favorite actually is the Mote in God's Eye. So I will default to a different
Well,
book.
I
Yeah.
have. If we're going to talk about Larry and Jerry in
Yeah.
collaboration, I loved Mote in God's Eye, but I really liked Lucifer's Hammer better.
Okay.
That I have to admit that because I got to work on the last volume of the Janissaries and finish it after Jerry's death, I always loved the Janissaries novels.
That's
Okay.
cool.
So I'm like, yeah, I was like, okay, fine. I was in North Carolina at Bain's office, and we were talking about books we'd read. And I said, there are two series that I would have loved to have gotten a chance to help finish up. And they said, what? And I said, well, I'd love to finish the story of Lord Calvin of Otherwhin. Okay, I said, or Janissaries. And Tony Weisskopf looked at me and said, oh, you would have liked to work on the Janissary series? And I said, yes. And she said, have I got a deal for you?
Nice.
So, yeah.
And then Determined Chief, this was during your commentary on the book you like to carry around that was a bad one.
Yeah.
Says, I love when authors mention train wreck books, helps me add to the bad book collection.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people are into bad books, so you can't
Yeah.
discount those.
Well, it's kind of like
Yeah.
watching Mars Attacks, okay?
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's more like Jerry Springer. When you watch Jerry Springer, you're like,
That's
at
right.
least I'm not on that show. You read some
Yeah.
off the blog, it's like, I can do better than that. So,
Yeah. Well, it is true that reading books like that will convince anyone that they can do a better job. I hadn't thought of it as a confidence builder, Richard, but you got a point there.
I have a little update for David here. The Phillies did score one in the top of sixth. We are now in the bottom of the seventh,
I
and the Braves lead
know.
3-2.
I have.
Yeah.
I have to confess that game day is up on my phone. But we will have to see. I'm not sure. Ozzy may have just scored a run. I don't know. Anyway, be that as it may, yeah. The the talking about Larry and Pornell and Niven collaborations. That was a writing team where absolutely they were both very strong writers, but where absolutely the sum was greater than the parts. You know
Yes,
what
that's
I'm saying?
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it was a very different experience
Yes.
reading one of their books together versus their individual books. I
Yeah.
agree
Well,
with that.
if you read Lucifer's Hammer and then you read Ringworld or Janissaries, okay, you see the difference between these two authors working on their own as opposed to their collaborative work. I have to say that in Fury Born, the original Path of the Fury, had come out about 2 months before I was a guest at a convention up in West Virginia. And I was very much the new kid on the block. And I was sitting at a table beside Roger Zelazny. Okay.
Oh.
And I'd probably signed every book of mine in Virginia, all 12. And he was kind of in a hiatus, between. And he looked at me and he said, I finished reading Path of the Fury last night. I was like, oh God, oh God, oh God. And then he said to me, he said, I think it may have been the best blend of science fiction and fantasy I have ever read.
Wow.
not bad. Yeah.
I
That's
have
a
never.
flooring statement. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I have never forgotten the. And then see, I was stuck in Virginia for about a week and a half because my Volvo had swallowed the timing gears, and it was a 78, so they had to demothball the assembly line in Sweden and then ship the parts across by Windjammer, kind of thing. And Roger and I were staying with the same people in Virginia, the private home that we were staying in. And I remember sitting out on the back porch of this house that was built before the Civil War, rain pounding, thunderstorm pounding on the tin roof. We're sitting there drinking beer with our feet shoved out under the water. And here is Roger Zelazny talking to me like I've got 20 books in print or he's only published 5. Okay. And I knew right then that that was who I wanted to be when I grew up. Okay. To have that kind of an attitude towards the journeyman in the craft. Okay. And I've tried to do that. You also have to be willing to tell somebody, I don't think so. You know what I'm saying? Because you owe honesty. But I'd say that it's rare for me to find somebody who truly, truly wants to write that doesn't have at least a little bit of the bug for it. I think that the thing that kills an awful lot of wannabe writers is their inability to edit themselves.
Yes. 100% in my experience. I also find that most people who come for advice or come for questions about their writing and they want you to take a look at it or whatever, though, most of the time they don't want to hear an actual professional like critique of things. They want to be told that what they're doing is valid to kind of motivate themselves.
Yeah. Well,
that seems to be the case the most part.
It is. And Richard has heard me say this before. My favorite John Paul Jones quote is not, "I have not yet begun to fight." My favorite John Paul Jones quote is from a letter that he wrote to Benjamin Franklin, I believe, while he was trying to get one of the ships being built in revolutionary France. And it's, I think, from the same letter where he says he wants to be associated only with a fast ship because he intends to go in harm's way. But the quote itself is, "It seems to be a law inflexible unto itself, that he who will not risk cannot win." And that is true about writing. If you are not willing to risk failing, you can never succeed. I could have been published 10 years before I was, if I'd been willing to risk finding out that I couldn't be. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of people that I've talked to, and I was one of them for a while, who was like, I could be a writer. I could be a writer. The thing is, if you're not willing to, put it to the test, to win or lose it all, okay, one day you're 70 years old and what you're saying is, I could have been a writer. Okay. So my advice to anybody out there who thinks that this might be something that they could do, that they want to do, is try it. Okay. And I'll say this too. The avenues available to getting published today are incredibly broader than they were when I was coming along, including publishing your own book and putting it out there to see what happens. All right. I think that traditional publishing still has a whole lot to offer in terms of learning to do it right. All right. And one of the reasons it does is because you are getting editorial input. You're not just editorial input, but business input. If you, it is not unheard of for established authors to pitch a book to a publisher and have the publisher say, nah, I don't think that's what you need to be doing right now. I think you need to be doing something else. I think you need to be doing this series over here. I think you need to do that, or just give me another idea, that's not this one, kind of thing. Well, when you're self-pub, okay, you go with the idea that you pitched that just got turned down. Traditional publishing, you have to find another way to get to where you're going. And if you look back at it in another 18 months or whatnot, you normally understand why the publisher was telling you what he or she was telling you. Okay. Now, I've been really blessed in my relationship with Baen Books because I signed on with Baen when they were only a couple of years old. Okay. And Toni Weisskopf, who's now the publisher at Baen, was my editor for many, many years. And she was and remains one of the best editors in the business. Absolutely. I mean,
if not the best editor in the business. I mean, she's up there.
I
Yeah.
would say the best, but people would say, "Well, of course you think she is," you know. Okay, but one of the hallmarks of a really good editor is a really good editor says, "There's a problem here. Here's what the problem is," and then stops, and then the author goes away and figures out how to fix it. A bad editor says, "There's a problem here, and here's how you need to fix it."
Right, because you get that line of like, this is a problem for the story. This needs to be addressed. Versus, here's how I would write it, and
Yeah.
here's how I would write it. Invariably changes the voice of what the author's doing.
Now,
I agree with that.
I will also say that one thing that happens in the traditional publishing route that can drive you absolutely crazy is the copy edit. Okay. If you've got an established relationship with your copy editor, if your copy editor has a good Bible on the series, you're great. I wound up with a copy editor who started right out telling me that I couldn't call ships she or her because ships are not alive and therefore they do not have gender.
Oh no.
And this copy editor not only told me that, but she went through the book and changed them all
Oh
without my
no.
okay. Okay.
Ooh.
All right. And then it was like I had a line where I was talking about how the horse-drawn combines that the Teresian innovation had made available, how it reduced the demand for agriculture. And I was talking about how many men with scythes this combine replaced. She put a note on there. Traditionally, the majority of agricultural work was performed by women. Okay.
No.
And all the way through.
Sounds like somebody had a little bit of an agenda there.
Well,
sounds like someone's never picked up a scythe before.
Yeah. But I'm like, oh, I was so pissed by the time I just basically sent the manuscript back and said, let's start over with somebody else, which we did. I I sent this absolutely scathing letter to my editor, email. It was like 12-point type, and when I printed it out, it was 5.5 pages long. In which I expressed my views as to what had happened here. And about a week went by, and I looked at it, and I sent another email to him, and I said, "Yeah, I may have been a little intemperate there, you know." And he said, "No," he said, "I went back and looked at the copy edit. I thought you were actually pretty restrained." But generally speaking, a good copy editor will help save you from the kinds of things that it's 5-2 Atlanta now, by the way.
Oh wow,
yeah,
that was what that ding was, huh?
Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that, you know. A good copy editor catches continuity problems, asks you, is this the verb you really meant to use? Okay. Are you sure this is the way you want to do this? Or I thought in book 3 you said that. Okay. A good copy editor is worth his or her weight in platinum. All right. A bad copy editor is grounds for suicide. Okay. Because they won't let you shoot them. You know?
This talk actually gets me to an interesting question. I mean, you have, so many books in the Honorverse series at this point. I don't exactly know how many. Is it 30? It's up there.
I think there's like 23 mainstream novels and 7 anthologies, and then there's the Crown of Slaves, and then there's the Shadow series. So it's probably
a lot
in the area of 30. Yeah.
You must be exceedingly organized to keep track of continuity and things like that. I mean, that's my first thing. I'm like, how do you even manage that even a little bit? Do you have a process on that?
Well, before I wrote the first word of On Basilisk Station, I wrote an 85,000 word tech Bible.
Oh boy!
In which I laid out the basic technology and the format of the diaspora, and built the political terrain for the 2 major combatants and the Solarian League. Had decided what I was going to do with the biosciences, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was careful while I was doing it to design in some limitations that I knew were going to make problems for my characters, because what you can't do is almost more important than what you can do in many respects when it comes to
True.
writing a story. And I knew the only thing that I knew about Honor Harrington at that point was that she was Eurasian, that she was over 6 feet tall, that she was from a heavy gravity planet, um, that she had because she'd been genetically modified for the environment, she had just devastating hand-eye coordination, and she had Nimitz. Okay, that was all that I knew about her when I started writing the first book. But I kept a timeline in which each critical event that I nailed down, like Honor's birth date, went into the timeline. Okay, the date that her parents were born on the different planets that they were born went into the timeline, and then each novel came in with the critical events in it on the timeline. It was nowhere near as detailed as the ones that I kept after Shadow Saganami came down the pike, because at that point I had elements going on that were weeks apart in terms of travel time and whatnot. And it was critical to keep everything coordinated there. So I built, just built a table from in Word that I could keep adding rows to as I went along. And every time something important happened, it went onto the timeline with the date that it happened. So it'd be like courier boat leaves Manticore for Talbot sector. Boom. And then I would go down to the point at which it would arrive and put an entry and say courier boat arrives Talbot quadrant. And then I would fill in on that as I went along. And if you're going to write series, you do things like that. I mean, you have to. Your brain's not going to keep up. Now, in the case of the Honorverse, I also have the advantage of U9, which is Tom Pope and Chris Weave and Mark Gudis and whatnot. And they basically are the keepers of the Honorverse Tech Bible, especially
Nice.
Tom. Tom has done 3 collaborative novels with me and Tim Zahn. I frequently will drop Tom a message or give him a call and say, I can't remember, when we were doing the Mark 13 extended range missile, what was the acceleration rate on it? Because and I'm flipping through my notes and I'm not finding it. That's not a good example because the missiles are nailed down pretty hard in my copy of the Tech Bible, but that's the kind of question that I'll ask him, and he'll get back to me. Oh, well, it was blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, thank you. And I go on. In the Safehold books, I'm into the second, for want of a better term, the second series of those books. The first one ended with the defeat of the Inquisition and whatnot. Now we're starting up again. Okay, well, I have a chart from it that has every single named character in that book listed alphabetically with the character's birth date.
Wow.
so that
that's intense.
Yeah, well, okay, but when I say that a character is 17 and another character is 21, yeah, they are, folks. And you don't realize frequently when you're starting out on a series that kind of note keeping is going to be necessary or desirable. And if it's going to be a trilogy or 5 books or whatever, maybe it's not. But if you're going to grow beyond that, and the other thing that I do that drives, well, there are 2 things I do that drive some people absolutely crazy. One is the infamous info dump. Okay, because I will stop and do an aside and give the reader details about missile accelerations and ranges and everything else. Okay, the reason I do that is I hate the as you know, Bob formula for delivering information.
Yeah, okay. I know that.
Yes. Well, in the earlier books in the series, I didn't have to do that because I had cursed the Havenite officers with these political commissars who didn't know squat. So they had to explain to the commissars. It wasn't an as you know, Bob. It's as you should know, Bob, if you weren't a friggin' idiot, kind of thing. Okay, but then they went away. All right. And all of a sudden you're stuck with, okay, now, but I think that it does less damage to the flow of the action to just take a pause, give them that information, and then pick up the action and not have the characters having to reflect on why they're making the decisions they're making when they're in the furball. Okay. So that's one thing I do that some people are like. If you've ever seen the online floating around David Weber orders a pizza, I was nailed dead center by somebody who was obviously reacting to the info dumps. Anyway, the other thing that I do that drives some people crazy and makes other people really happy is I very seldom have an unnamed secondary character. If I insert a character into a book and that character is going to be there for more than a sentence or two, okay, then I'm not going to call that character the lieutenant or the sergeant. It's going to be Sergeant Gilroy or Lieutenant Jackson or whatever. Okay, that means that as I'm writing the book, I go to my character sheet. I go to Lester Tourville's command. I go to the ship this guy was on. I go under it and I enter Lieutenant so-and-so, 175 centimeters tall, brown hair, brown eyes, and he's the assistant TAC officer. Bam. And I note it in there. Okay, that means if I need to go back to that officer, to that slot, I've got that character. And those characters have been promoted right along with honor all the way through the book. And a lot of those secondary characters have segued over into major characters like Alice Truman, the commander of the light cruiser in honor of the Queen, who is one of the 3 senior fleet commanders of the Royal Manticoran Navy by the time honor is going after the Solarian League. Susan Hibson, who we meet as, I think she's a lieutenant when we meet her. She might already be a captain. She's the brigadier general who commands the occupation of the Mesa system, when we get to that point in the storyline. So by doing that, you build up this incredibly deep bench that you can always promote somebody from if you need them. And you can also get that sense of continuity, the interaction of the mainstream characters with all these other people around them. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that definitely adds to the immersion for sure.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, and Richard, I think, has heard me say this before. The book in which I killed Andrew LaFollette, Honor's chief armsman, the last surviving member of her original personal armsman, who she had left home on Manticore expressly to keep him from dying for her like all the others had. The man that she loved and that she knew loved her, although neither of them ever said a word about it. And she made him the personal armsman for her son. Okay. And he dies saving her son's life. Okay. I tried to write that book 4 or 5 times without Andrew dying, and I couldn't do it. I didn't know why, but I couldn't do it. And finally, after I'd handed the book in and a few months had passed, I realized why I couldn't not kill Andrew LaFollette. And the reason was that in the same book, 90+% of Honor Harrington's family on the planet Sphinx is killed in a tidal wave that results from deorbiting wreckage after a sneak attack on the planet. Okay, so here is this woman. She's coming home. She's finding out that 90+% of her family is killed, but you really don't know them. You haven't met them. Okay, but she's been with Honor for close to 20 years. She's been with Andrew for close to 20 years. You know exactly what Andrew meant to her. You know exactly what she meant to Andrew. And so when I hit you with his death, you can extrapolate from that to all the other people that she lost. But I didn't realize when I was writing the book that was why it had to be that way. I only realized it had to be that way after the book was done. And so sometimes you just have to go with my inner voice, whatever, that says this is the way it's got to be.
I just finished up writing a couple scenes where the one series I'm working on now is called the Abarth Crusade. And when I was doing the whole setup for it, I knew that this one character had to be killed by this one bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, this is in book 4. So you see when this character gets introduced in book 2, I make sure, hey, readers, you're really going to like this guy or gal. So then when this this fight happens in book 4 with the bad guy character, and then when our main character is about to get revenge and he's not able to get revenge, that was also set up way earlier. So I'm waiting to see how the readers react to two really big plot changes or plot changes when they get to it, and either they're going to be like, I can't believe you did that, or how dare you. So we'll see how it goes. But
Richard, go Richard, go.
No, but like I knew this character was going to die way earlier, but then when it came time to write the scene, I was like, I don't want to.
Yes.
Like, I got to. It's
It's
like I kind of played myself. I was like, well, I better make sure the character, your readers like this character, because when he or she dies and it's come time to get revenge and they don't get revenge, they're super pissed about this. And then when it came time for me to write the scene, it's like, I don't want to. But
I am notoriously sheepish about killing my characters. Whenever I outline it, I'm just like dead, and then I get to writing it, and I'm like,
yeah.
Maybe death is a strong word.
Well, I know it was one of the Niven Pornell collaborations, and I cannot for the life of me remember which one it was. But there's a passage in it in which, like, somebody's thinking about this person who's just arrived, thinking she was like an ice maiden or whatever. And they realized that the star system they had built, the planet this guy was from, was so warm that there was never going to be any ice out there for him to be ice maidening about. But they liked the line so much that they went back and redesigned the entire star system to move the planet out far enough for that to be a line to occur to him. Okay. That's one of the things that authors can do, when they find themselves in a situation like this. But I will say this. I have a reputation for being devious. Okay. I totally unmerited. Oh, and by the way, the score is now 7-2, Braves.
I saw that. I think you're in the clear now. You never know in baseball, but I think you're in the clear now.
Well, listen, we had a 12-run lead over Nola in one game, and the Phillies came back and won. So until the end of the ninth inning, till the sunlight rises on that coffin and the dust cloud comes out, I'm not gonna, but for example, in the Honor Harrington books, I went to enormous lengths to convince everyone that the People's Republic of Haven was the French Revolution. Okay, including giving them a Napoleon analog. I gave them the tennis court oath. I let Robert Stanton Pierre organize the Committee of Public Safety expressly so he could sign the proclamations. Rob S. Pierre. I mean, I was
with a grape shot.
Oh yeah, everything. Okay, although Whiff of Grape Shot was written by Steve Sterling. Okay, and it was Cluster Bomb, not Grape Shot in this case. But the whole time I was doing that, I was saying, watch my left hand. Okay, because over here, I knew you guys are totally wrong about who these people were. And you'll find that out when Thomas Theismann comes along and he's Cincinnatus restoring the Republic instead of Esther McQueen coming along and being Napoleon and creating the empire. But I had started doing that literally from book 1. Okay. And I introduced Theismann, who was eventually going to be my Cincinnatus, in the second book in Honor of the Queen. All right. In the Dahak novels, Mutineer's Moon, the Armageddon Inheritance, I buried the key that would be used by my heroes in the second book to defeat 1.5 million starships with only 90. I buried it in the third paragraph of the first book as just an observation about what might have happened under certain circumstances, and then didn't touch it again until I needed to dust it off as the brilliant tactical insight that would allow us to win the battle. Okay. Readers love it when you do that kind of stuff. Okay. But they get really pissed if all of a sudden you've got, you just pull it out of thin air that this is the god weapon they need to get out of the corner you've painted them into.
What always upsets me is when I get the email or whatnot about something being pulled out of thin air, and then you go, no, actually, I layered it in chapter 2, and you just missed it.
I can't help it. I can't help it. You didn't see it.
Chekhov's gun was put right there,
right
over the mantelpiece. Okay.
Thank you, Determined Chiefy, for the super chat. Question I always wanted to ask: how does it feel knowing you've carried a character that you and your fans love? I've always pulled back so far, Determined Chiefy, but I have 2 planned that are going to really piss you off, knowing what you've read so far. So I really hope that I can convince myself to go through with it, because I can't. I want to make you cry. I really do, in a good way, because I like you to continue reading. So
Richard, Richard, I know you're on shorter time than me. And besides that, you haven't been around long enough to kill as many of them as I have. So you go next.
Somebody once asked Dan Abnett that question, who's a brilliant English writer, and Dan reportedly
love Dan Abnett.
Said,
yes.
Did you make you feel something? And if the death made the reader feel something, mission accomplished. Mm-hmm. So it's when it comes time to it's a big battle scene. There's probably going to be some casualties here, and it comes down to is if you're going to knock off a well-liked character, it should be meaningful, and then that way the reader can go, well, it's not like he just walked in front of traffic, and then that was it. Because
it's kind of like,
go ahead, David.
It's a little bit like the whole Tasha Yar thing.
Oh yeah.
In
that's right.
Star Trek. Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes down to, well, it's time for someone to die, if it's impactful and it was a worthy death, then by and large the readers will probably accept that. Although I've had some people, I had one character in my main Ember War series who was quite the reader favorite, and he didn't make it out of the last book, and I've had more than one person stop me at a convention and say why, and eventually I just tell them that, well, it wasn't really my decision. I had planned for some space magic to save the character, and then I kind of felt the character staring at me through the screen saying, that's not how it's going to go. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
Well, there's another side to it too, especially for those of us who write military science fiction. And that is that most of our readers, except, I got a lot of current and ex-military readers. So I'm going to say, aside from them, have very little experience with violence and less experience with violent death. Okay. We are probably, I know everybody's screaming about this, that, and the other right now, but we are probably the most protected society in the history of the human race.
Oh, by far.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that means that our actual experience with violence is almost all secondhand. Okay. Through what we've seen on TV and the movies, experienced in books, etc. All right, if I'm going to write military fiction, then I have a responsibility as a writer of military fiction to not sanitize it. Now, there are 2 ways you can come at that. One is you can take the approach that some writers take, that no one can write military action as bad as it really is, so I will write it as bad as I possibly can. The problem there is that it turns into sort of a splatter porn situation in some respects, and you burn the reader out. You numb them, and it loses impact. Well, another way is you can say, okay, I can let some main characters die. Okay, but if you let main characters who aren't important to the reader die, still nothing. Okay, not in terms of the real cost of embracing this violence. If you write military fiction in which only bad guys get killed or only spear carriers get killed, and anybody who gets hit by a high-powered weapon either dies instantly and painlessly, or it was only a flesh wound despite the fact that it went through the bony part of the shoulder, kind of thing. That's pornography. It really is. And so you have to write fiction in which the reader and the characters in the story lose people who are important to them, because that shit happens in a war.
Yeah.
Okay. And those are the ones you really, really miss. They're the ones who tear the hole in your heart. They're the ones the ropes of poppies are for in Governor, Richard. I mean, those are the deaths that and one of the things that somebody writing military science fiction, I think, has a responsibility to do is to help their readers understand that you had better be damn sure that this military action that you're contemplating taking over here is going to be worth losing good people. Because no matter how bad the bad guys are, there are good people somewhere on that side who are going to get caught in the gears, even if there's civilians behind the line, and you are going to be putting good people that you care about in harm's way. And some of them will not be coming home. Okay?
Absolutely.
I think it was after my first tour in Iraq. I came back and I was gone to church, and one of the nice church ladies there, she's like, "Oh, thank goodness you're all back. Let's sing this one hymn," and it was like a very go off to march to war, boys. It's gonna be great kind of song. No. And I'm sitting there, I just spent 15 months in Iraq, and I came back, and I'm like, lady, your heart's in the right place, but you have no idea what you are advocating. You have no idea what your good, happy thoughts just put me and all my brothers through the last 15 months in some shithole that really didn't need to be in. And it was kind of like, I was like, all right, I did not go off on her. I didn't say anything. I'm like, oh, thank you, sister. That was a great song. I'm glad we got to sing that one. It was kind of like, I'm going to stuff that one away and try to figure out how to educate this lady somehow through fiction. That when you say, hey, young men, go to war, have fun, you'll be home by Christmas. It doesn't turn out that way.
It will be such fun.
Yeah, when I was in Iraq, I even heard there was, like, oh, we'll be home by Christmas, and it's kind of like, no, we weren't home by Christmas.
Well, okay.
Oops. I don't want to cut off this conversation because this is a really good conversation. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Well, okay. There's two sides to the coin. Okay, on the one hand, you have to understand the price. On the other hand, you have to not allow the price to automatically paralyze you. Okay, I was just in a discussion on Facebook about who enabled Adolf Hitler. Okay, at what point was Adolf Hitler enabled? Okay, and if the French had been willing to reoccupy the Rhineland, okay, the first time that he started getting feisty, it probably would have brought the government down. But they had just fought the First World War. It was 17 years. That's it in their past. Okay, more recent than 9/11 for us, with millions of war dead. And so it is no wonder at all, if you know history, to understand why they were unwilling to open that flask of demons all over again. And yet it was absolutely the worst decision they could have made. All right. And from a historical perspective, looking back, that's blindingly clear. But also from a historical perspective, looking back, it's blindingly clear why they didn't do it. And that's what I mean when I say that you have to know what the price can be, but you also have to be able to say, is this going to be worth that price? Because sometimes, God help us, it is.
It's easier to second guess things, 80 years later, right?
Oh, absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. And like I said, right this minute, my son's at Paris Island.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law was in for 23 years. His son was in for 8, all Marines. I'm sorry, Richard. They were all Marines.
My father's a former Marine too. So
Okay.
he never lets me forget it.
Yeah, but and my son and I talked about this, and I told him, I said, one of the things that Rudyard Kipling regretted till the day he died was that he pulled strings to get his son into the Royal Army during World War I because his son felt it was his duty to go, and he was killed. And I said, and if something happens to you, I'm going to second guess myself for giving you the value system that caused you to decide you wanted to be Marine in the first place. I said, but I am, the pain will be awful. Okay. But I don't want you to be anyone else.
Mm.
I'm already talking down the military to my sons. They're oldest one's 10, so
get that out of the way early.
Yeah. All right, Richard needs to go. We've got I'll put up this last question, and I think it's getting time. We can close things out. That was a great discussion. Thank you, David. Okay, thoughts on the way copyright law can force creators to go after their own fans. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by this, but I'm kind of thinking, in the
I
90s and 80s, you know what they're talking about? Is there a specific situation going on right now?
I don't know that there's one going on right now, but if there's not one going on right now, it's probably because people are taking precautions. Okay. The problem is that if you don't defend your copyright, if you don't tell people they're not authorized to use your characters and whatnot, and they're used over a lengthy period of time, then the people using them can make the case in court that you have allowed them to do this in the past, and now you're, and in doing so, you have lost the right to tell them they can't in the future. And that is why I can think of a couple of name authors right offhand who have contracts that anybody who wants to write fanfic has to sign, in which they acknowledge that they are being
at least there's that. I've seen the much more stringent scenarios. The one I thought of, I'm kind of a nerd. I'm going to admit that right now. But I was very I was very involved in Anne McCaffrey's like sort of Dragon Riders of Pern group back in like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And they were just like, I mean, they would not allow you to even have like a role play group, and I'm a big role playing type of guy. They would shut that down so fast and they'd get on you about it.
Yeah.
The family, I'm actually pretty decent friends with them. So nothing against them, but that's an interesting thing. Like I was like 16, 17 at the time, and I'm just like, why?
Well, I have a rule of thumb. I will not go to a site where fanfic from my universes is available, because if I have never read it, okay, first of all, nobody can say, well, you stole my idea, which has been a problem for name authors. Okay.
Star Wars has been having a lot of problems with that lately.
Yeah. The other one is that I'm not required to hammer them if I don't know they did it. And the fact that I didn't hammer them doesn't constitute my giving them permission to do it.
Right.
So at the time, if something happens where I need to bring the hammer down, I can honestly say in court, if I need to, I was not aware this was happening, or I would have done something about it sooner. See what I'm saying? And I don't like that, because most of the folks who write fanfic write it because of how much they love the universe.
They're passionate about it, right? I mean, beyond those are super fans,
And that can create some really ugly situations when you have to tell somebody who loves your work that much, no, you can't do this. Okay, because they feel that the author whose work they love has repaid their love by kicking them in the teeth when they wanted to share their joy in the universe. Okay, I totally understand how that works. Unfortunately, the author who owns the copyright doesn't have a lot of choice about defending the copyright. Now, some of us are a little more tactful than others about how we do it. Okay. Sharon will tell you that I am always the soul of tact, as in the soul of the shoe of tact, but I try not to step on anybody any harder than I have to. I'm a lot more likely to step on a pro who's given somebody else a hard time than I am to step on a fan who's just being so enthusiastic. It's you need to go and hide.
It's a very different ball game in that regards, like with comics and with written fiction. I would guess. What's interesting is, as I'm thinking in the comics realm, almost every comic creator I know gets fan drawings of their character done, and they get it sent to them, and I get them all the time too. It's wonderful, and I always just share it. But I guess if it's a drawing, they're not really adding idea or plot or story, so I guess it's a different thing. I guess it's kind of interesting.
Not only that, but I will guarantee you that the drawings that you are getting are clearly artistically different in interpretation from your own work.
Oh, obviously. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's not going to be you're not modifying your work to reflect what somebody else sent you.
That's true.
Okay. So there's never a question in here about your art, your character, your whatever. If a pro picks up a plot idea that he didn't even know was in a piece of fanfic and goes with it, you can wind up with a situation where an irate fan is saying, hey, I had that idea. You should give me some credit for it. Okay. And at that point, the author is kind of in a lose-lose situation where that fan is concerned. You see what I'm saying? Okay, here's we were talking about Path of the Fury. Okay. All right. I wrote Path of the Fury probably within 6 months or a year. I'd have to go back and check, of when Leslie Fish wrote a folk song, Fury. Okay. I'd never heard of it. You didn't know it existed. My sister-in-law sent me a copy of the folk song shortly after Path of the Fury came out. And it's like she was reading my mail or as I was reading her mail when she wrote that folk song. Anybody who has read Path of the Fury should go back and listen to Leslie's Fury. Okay, I've stolen this cutting edge ship loaded with weapons of war, and I'm going to ram you at the end of my ride, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it was scary. Okay, but because I'd never seen her song and she'd never seen my manuscript. Okay, there was no, it wasn't like, oh, well, you got that idea from me going either way. It's just one of those things that the timing on it was just,
the zeitgeist just kind of hit you both at the same time.
Yeah. I to the best of my knowledge, I've never had that kind of coincidence in timing come up again. I've had a couple of plot ideas that I wanted to use that I had tucked away that somebody else has grabbed and run with, doing an entirely different series from the one I wanted to do or whatever. And it's always been sort of interesting to me to see how what they do differs from what I might have done with it.
I was talking to Kevin J. Anderson, and I was thinking, hey, I was kind of asking, could I write a Sardaukar novel? Maybe. Mm-hmm. And then he sent me this short story he'd already written about a Sardaukar story. Mm-hmm. And it was like beat for beat, everything I had in mind.
Yeah.
That was going to be in the book. And they already had it. I'm like, wow, how did that happen? I mean, because
That's amazing.
Absolutely zero ideas. So I'm like, hey, John, Kevin, here's my background. I could probably do a really good Sardaukar story. What do you think? He's like, here, look at this. And I'm like, you've already got my ideas. Okay. All right. Like, how did that happen? That's interesting.
That's amazing.
So, and it can happen. And sometimes what happens is your name is Straczynski and somebody decides they're going to do Deep Space Nine. Okay, I'm just saying. But we're in the business of creating universes. Even if we're writing in this universe, if we're writing fiction set here, we're creating universes. We're creating characters. Okay. It is inevitable that there are going to be resonances and similarities between the ideas for the universes that we have to create. But the thing that people follow writers for is not really so much the universes they create as the voice with which they invite the reader into that universe.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've said this over and over and over again. A weak story that is strongly told will succeed, where a strong story which is weakly told will fail. Okay. That is just like, you cannot win if you will not risk. That too is true. And so it is, in my opinion, much more how the storyteller tells the story than it is the nature of the story the storyteller tells that draws readers in. I'm not saying that both are not important, but what I am saying is that by far voice is the more important of the two.
When I first started writing, the very first thing I ever wrote was a screenplay about the Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen. He was a real person. His life is meticulously documented. Everything about him was known. And when I wrote the screenplay, I ended up coming across 4 other screenplays about the Red Baron, written by completely different people. And the interesting thing was is that we all picked different things to focus on with his life. And
Richard,
then,
what if you recast him as a strong female lead, though? I think that would play better in today's market.
John, do you know how lucky you are that you're in California?
Funny story. There was one time where
I'm just saying,
Red Baron came across some British pilots who'd been shot down and captured, and they asked if the one flying the all red plane was a girl, because they had thought that the one flying his plane was like this Joan of Arc sort of character. So that would have been. I worked that into the book, but it worked. But and then so all of us had written these Red Baron scripts, and then the Germans went and made their own movie, and it was awful. You think a guy who's famous for shooting down 80 airplanes would shoot down one airplane during the course of the movie about himself?
At some point, yes.
Never happened. I mean, like the best thing about this movie was like there's a lot of different sweaters. I mean, like the sweater budget was on point, and it had Lena Helmsley in it for some reason. But anyway.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I think we had a really good discussion. And David, thank you so much for coming on. Richard, thank you so much for coming on. You guys are the best. These are two of my favorite authors right here, 100%. I highly recommend both of their works. Richard's Ember War universe is incredible. The Honorverse is incredible. And of course, they've got their book together, which I'm holding upside down now. Governor, which I highly recommend also. So this link is in the description below.
John. They're microgravity. Yeah. It's okay. Oh, and by the way, the game is over. Final score.
You win.
2. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And a happy ending. That's all anybody wants at the end of the day is a happy ending.
Our magic number to clinch is now 1.
Beautiful.
And we play again tomorrow.
Good night. You guys could say last words if you want. Yeah.
No, thanks very much for having us. And for the folks wondering about when the sequel to Governor will come out, David and I are going to be starting on that soon. We'll just leave it there.
Yes.
So the outline's already done. He and I both have so many projects on our plate right now. We're like, get this book done, then I'll get to the other one. And so
and I had COVID in January that put me in the hospital for 10 days and took me down as a writer for a couple of months. And in the middle of that, Eric Flint and I were working on a collaboration that wound up needing a lot of work. But the big reason was that all of our previous collaborations had been following along behind the advancing timeline in the universe. This one had to extend beyond it. And that put Eric in a different place for writing the book. And he had to use a lot of my solo characters that he hadn't internalized as well as I did. And it had an October release date. We got the final manuscript handed in after September the 1st, and it is going to make its October drop date. Which in traditional publishing is incredible. But that has totally screwed the schedule that I had projected for the second half of this year. And so that is possibly going to have a follow-on effect into when we can get started with Governor, but the sequel to Governor. But in the case of Governor, I did like the first couple of chapters to sort of set stuff, and then Richard went ahead and did an entire first treatment rough draft. And I'm assuming it worked. So I'm guessing that's what we're going to do again this time.
Yeah, that's what I was planning. Yeah.
So that
Excellent.
will let him get started on it. The problem will be when I can get to it, if you see what I'm saying. And I have to say that even without the COVID, my ability to work 14-hour days at 69 is not what it was at 29. Go figure. I mean, you know.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I forgot to shill. I've got my campaign up for the Cosmic Warrior right now, which is my new graphic novel. If you guys are into John Carter meets like the Green Lantern, want some classic superhero sci-fi stuff, that link's in the description below also. Thank you, everybody, for checking out the books. You guys are the people we appreciate beyond anybody else because you allow us to do what we're going to do. And we'll be back sometime soon. I hope I can have both these gentlemen back again. So thank you for tuning in. See you guys.
Thank you, John. Thank you, David.